My postcard today is from Preston Manor in Sussex, a Georgian house in Edwardian living memory. Preston Manor, on the outskirts of Brighton, the only house in England that is completely untouched by any other age. It is as it was in the Edwardian period. Now, I said before I came inside, David, that this is unique because it's untouched by any other age other than the Edwardian. What I should have said was, of course, all the furniture and the decor, isn't it?
That's right, yes. The house was left to Brighton in 1932 by the last owners, Charles Thomas Stanford, who you can see above us, just up there, and his wife, Ellen Thomas Stanford, who's over there. And it was left more or less intact. They refurnished the house from 1903 until about 1910. Of course, they added a few things after those dates, but those are the key dates. And so what we see today is a house that's a kind of time capsule of circa 1905 to 1910, an Edwardian house, and very, very rare. There are hardly any other like this.
When was it first built?
It was first built in 1738. There are, in fact, foundations that date from about 1250, but the core of the house is 1738. And then it was added to by a rather dim architect called Charles Stanley Peach in 1905. No one's ever heard of Charles Stanley Peach, but everyone will be familiar with him because he designed Wimbledon Centre Court.
Dim's the word. I think that's classic. We're sitting on this seat. You're not allowed to when you come here, I'll add, but we are, because we're having a little chat about the house, just for you. It's very comfortable, but that's all you'll know about it. This is obviously then where they could have sat, had chats. What would this room have been for?
Well, it was the entrance hall, but in the period just before the First World War, it also functioned as what was called a living hall. It was where gentlemen and ladies could mix informally, and where ladies could smoke if necessary. It was about the only room they could smoke, if they were fast, that is, because pre-First World War it was only fast women that smoked. Gentlemen, of course, would smoke their cigars in the dining room, but ladies could smoke in here. It's also where the family put their best things, because it's the room that people first see when they come from outside. And so they put their best furniture in here to impress visitors with, here are no fly-by-nights, here are people with wealth and taste. And they also put their family portraits here. Problem with the Stanfords is they weren't a terribly grand family, so they actually bought instant ancestors in the auction houses. They bought a pair of instant ancestors at Christie's in 1894 and then christened them and pretended they were distant relatives of the family.
They sound a riot, these two.
They were.
I was thinking what George Formby used to say about fast Lancastrian women or Lancashire lasses.
Yes.
Cheeky fast cats.
Yes.
That's obviously by the sounds of it.
Ellen was a bit of a cheeky, not this one, I'm looking at the wrong picture. His wife, Ellen, was really certainly a cheeky fast cat. I mean, she had an illegitimate child between her two marriages via the butler, which was a pretty rip-roaring thing to do in the years before the First World War.
Upstairs, downstairs, there's something in it, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be seeing the servants' quarters later if we're all very lucky. I'm enjoying this, I really am. Is there a present Lord Stanford?
No, the family is extinct.
Right.
Yes.
So just the lot in Canada?
Yeah.
Through the butler?
That's right. The last legitimate heir died in 1947. That was Ellen Stanford's son, called Mad Jack, John Montague Bennett Stanford, known as Mad Jack because he became a notorious eccentric. He stole the lead off the roof, not of this house, but of another house, to pay his gambling debts. He used to get up to all kinds of pranks that really annoyed his mother. One of them was he hated solicitors, and he sent a letter through the post, and he called his solicitors Messrs. Bother'em, Worry'em, and Annoy'em. Sounds like meant sue, grab it, and run in Private Eye, doesn't it? And the solicitors sued him for defamation through the public post, it was called. And his mother had to pay the court fees. And so, they weren't best friends. In fact, mother and son didn't just dislike each other, they hated each other. And as I say, he died in 1947, Ellen died in 1932. He should have inherited this house, but he didn't, because his mother cut him out of the will because she disliked him so much.
Goodness me. And
it's a sad story.
And no one in Canada got anything?
No.
Oh, that is a sad story. The withdrawing room?
Yes, a withdrawing room. So called not because you drew in it, but because you withdrew into it after dining in the dining room. The etiquette of this room was that it was used in the afternoons for morning calls, which took place at 4 o'clock, but were called morning calls nonetheless. It was used just before dinner, where guests assembled, and just after dinner, when the ladies would retire to this room, withdraw to this room, while the gentlemen smoked their cigars and told smutty stories around the dining room table. The gentlemen then would, of course, later join them. And here Ellen would do her political entertaining. Her husband Charles was rather a quiet, retiring sort of a man, but Ellen had great ambitions for him. She wore the trousers, there's no doubt about that. He became Mayor of Brighton and Conservative MP for Brighton and Hove, and in those days, before you could reach those exalted offices, you needed to entertain the right people in the right sort of style.
And she was obviously so ambitious for him. That is why, because this is the woman who bought ancestry.
Yes.
It's quite obvious she wanted success in everything.
Absolutely.
Didn't she?
We do know that she was a very snobbish woman and was actually slightly embarrassed by her, by the standards of the time, relatively lowly upbringing. Not upbringing, but ancestry. Hence the buying of ancestors. We know that she thought matching suites of furniture was terribly middle class, and so she didn't like things that matched. Hence, most of these things have different upholstery on them. And a weird story that was told me was that at various gatherings she had a bizarre sort of contraption attached to her arm, and it was made of wood, which were on sort of hinges. And when people shook hands with her, it was actually like shaking hands with a ruler attached to your hand. And people, of course, would just withdraw their hand immediately. She just didn't like shaking hands with people.
You sound a couple.
Yeah, I think they were a pair of cards, really, yes. At the séance here, the family had been troubled by various things. Noises of rolling beer barrels under the dining room, doors opening and closing for no apparent reason, and most horrible of all, disembodied hand crawling up the bedpost in one of the four-poster beds upstairs. And it was tapped out that this manifestation was a nun who'd been buried in unconsecrated ground as a result of a liaison with a monk. It sounds a little bit improbable, but it's very odd, this story. And if she were buried in consecrated ground, these manifestations would cease. Well, the family did nothing for a year. The manifestations went on, but in 1897 their hand was forced because the drains began to smell outside the drawing room where we've just been. The borough surveyor of the time was called in, the terrace was dug up, and 6 feet down the body of a woman was found, which was certified by a man called Dr. Blaber, who was a well-known Brighton doctor, as being over 400 years old. He said the bones were all terribly yellow and decayed, but the teeth were perfect. There then happened a really bizarre series of events, because John Bennett Stanford, Mad Jack, who wasn't present at the séance but heard about this and got very interested in the ghost story, said that he wanted to bury the body in consecrated ground, and he had it buried in the grounds of St. Peter's Church. The vicar got to hear about this and had actually dug the body up again, because he said he was not going to have a Roman Catholic skeleton in his good Anglican Church of England churchyard. He seemed to be forgetting that St. Peter's Church was founded in 1250 and it's a pre-Reformation foundation anyway. And the bones were then just deposited, apparently, outside the house again. And to cut a very long story short, it went on and on this. A faculty had to be obtained from the Bishop of Chichester to override the authority of the parish priest, and the bones were then buried. Okay, we're now entering a very different world, the below-stairs world of the servants. There were 13 servants here before the First World War, just looking after the 2 people. And we're just seeing the green baize door here, which was always the indicator that you were entering the forbidden world of the servants. Green baize, partly to indicate that you were entering servants' quarters, and it was partly to keep out cooking smells from the kitchens, which we're just about to go into.
Right. And this, again, is exactly how it was.
Hear the bells?
Oh, yes. Nursery, drawing room, bedroom 4, 1. Which was there? Oh, Stanford's.
Mrs. Stanford's sitting room, that's the morning room.
All right.
It's called the morning room. Bedroom 5, front door steps. Some of them may be missing, you see. There are marks here. They're not all here. Not every single bell is
Do they
here.
chime still?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Yep,
That was the back door.
That's the back
And they
door,
had different
yes.
tones, presumably, then they would get used to the
That's right,
tones.
a different tone for every bell, and of course it would continue swinging a bit. The servants would come out of the servants' hall, which is this room here, and answer whichever bell it was that was ringing.
Right, where should we go first?
Well, let's go into the kitchen here. The latest acquisition is this wonderful refrigerator here, which you can see.
The fridge?
Yes, came from Harrods there.
Oh, yes.
And you might think, how on earth does it work? Because there's no electricity or anything like that. What you did is bought ice from the fishmonger, and put the ice in there,
Yes.
and then it would just drain away, and you'd put your food in here,
Oh, yes.
and it would just chill it a little bit. We'd be nowhere near as cold as a modern
Still
refrigerator.
quite cold in there,
It's still
you know.
quite cold,
Yes.
yes. But it's all grained to look like oak on the outside. About 1910, that one there. Food would be brought in from the kitchen, and they'd eat their meat course here in total silence, in absolute silence. When they'd eaten their meat course, it would be taken away by the scullery maids, and then the pudding course would be brought in. When the pudding course was brought in, the butler and housekeeper would stand up, the lower servants would stand up, and the butler and housekeeper would then carry their pudding course into that room through there, which is the housekeeper's sitting room, where they'd then sit down and have their own pudding on their own. The lower servants then sat down here, and then they could talk. Then they could talk among themselves. It was the only time that they weren't supervised by the upper servants, because the hierarchy below stairs was just as restrictive, according to our ways of looking at things, as it was upstairs. But it was still restricted, even though the butler and housekeeper weren't there, because what do you think the holes bored in the top of the door are for? It's so that the conversation can be heard, and so that the servants can look in and prevent any impropriety, because this was the only time during the day when the male and female servants were together unsupervised, and of course they would be unmarried and quite young, and therefore dangerous, and so they had to be supervised through that door there.
Well, I think this is just absolutely fascinating. I mean, I just dropped into Preston Manor thinking, another manor house. And I tell you, David, you've really opened my eyes and everybody else's ears to what went on in an Edwardian house.
Well, thank you very much.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't want to go. Shall we have our own Pugs Parade?
I wish we could.
I wish we could. Lovely.